Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami Stackelhouse, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with fibro fog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse, and this is episode 146. Today, I'm interviewing author and storyteller Meg Stafford about how sharing our stories helps in our healing and helps those around us. Meg was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2007, and as part of keeping in touch with friends and family during her diagnosis and treatment, she started an email newsletter, which she called Breasty Business. So many people found her newsletter helpful in some unexpected ways that Meg turned it into a book, Topic of Cancer, Riding the Waves of the Big C. In many ways, I've done the same thing. My book and this podcast contain so much of my story in addition to practical how-tos. In fact, some of our most listened to episodes are our Stories of Hope series. In these episodes, I interview our graduates about their fibromyalgia and how they found ways to feel better. We share their stories. And our stories, they have power to help ourselves and the power to help those around us, power to help us feel less alone and to give us hope. If you haven't come out of the closet, so to speak, about your fibromyalgia, I hope this episode gives you some inspiration and some practical tips to try in sharing your story. Now, let me introduce you to our guest. Meg Stafford is an award-winning author of 2 memoirs. She's a speaker and a storyteller featured on WGBH's Stories from the Stage. As a 16 times literary award winner and columnist, Meg is an observer of humans and animals' delightful quirks. Her column, A Moment's Notice, was featured for many years in a number of local Boston area newspapers. A psychotherapist and social worker in private practice for 40 years, Meg hears powerful stories on a regular basis and always appreciates the connective tissue that telling our truths creates. She embraces the notion that the shortest distance between two people is a laugh. Now, here's my interview with Meg. Hi, Meg. Welcome. I'm excited to talk stories with you today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Me too. Looking forward to it. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, I always say our stories are powerful and we need to be sharing them. So when I saw you talk about that the other day, I knew we needed to have a conversation.
Absolutely.
Now, before we go into that, though, I would love for you actually just to share a little bit of your story. It is October, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and that's kind of where this starts a little bit for you. Your book, Topic of Cancer, Riding the Waves of the Big C, really started off, it is you sharing your story.
It really is. And it started out as an email distribution list to just very close friends and family, because I realized that I was happy to tell people anything, but the thing that drove me nuts was saying it over and over and over again. So I found that I could write one email and send it out to everybody at once. And had it been just a little bit later, it would have probably been a blog. But back in 2007, when I was diagnosed, it was like right on the cusp of that really being a thing. But I found that it was really important and helpful for me because I love writing anyway, had written columns for many years. So this was just a different application. But it was really a way for me to take in what had happened that day, particularly in the beginning. There was a lot of information gathering. I call it the funnel in, and meeting with a lot of different providers and clinicians. And I wanted people to know, but it was much easier to do it by email. So as I got deeper and deeper into it, it was therapeutic for me. It was helpful for me. It was a way to share the silly, zany things that happen and the serious things that happen. And I can vividly remember sitting at my keyboard and literally hovering above hitting send because I would worry, is this too much? Is it too heavy, too silly, too this, too that? But I determined that in order to remain true to myself, I had to hit send. So that's what I did. And I started getting feedback from people that they liked hearing what I had to say, or some would say, oh, I know this is strange, but I miss it when you don't write, because it was not every day. It was just whenever there was information to share, which was typically a few times a week. But it became a means of communication between me and them. And I never knew what I was going to get back.
Right, right. So, for the people listening, you were diagnosed with breast cancer. Was that, you said,
June of
2007?
2007.
2007. And for those of you listening, and Meg, I don't know if you even know this, but I lost my sister in 2016 to cancer. It was actually gallbladder cancer, which is really odd because that usually only affects older people. But it is what it is. And, at the beginning, there is a lot of just figuring out what is going on, what is happening, and then figuring out what are the options for treatment. And that can be so overwhelming. And then just walking the road, right?
Yes. And knowing who your team is and who is there to provide information and who knows what. And I very consciously chose to not Google, to not do internet searches, because I knew that I would overload doing that. So I really relied on my team and made sure that I was really comfortable with those people so that I could get enough information to make decisions without just being flooded by it. Because it was really important to me for my treatment to be a part of my life, but not my entire life. Some days it took over, but for the most part, I wanted it to stay in its
Stay in its
corner.
lane.
Right.
Oh, goodness. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, some of the things that you've touched on even now as we've been talking are things that I see come up with my students and my clients, particularly with my students as they go through their training program, people who become coaches, and then we go to graduation. And then there's this sort of coming out of the closet kind of where maybe you haven't really shared about your fibromyalgia with very many people, maybe just a small number of people. That can be scary. Like you said, like, how are people going to respond to it? What is it going to look like and feel like? And so I would love for you to share kind of how you processed all of that and I guess became okay with accepting whatever came because you just don't know how people are going to respond.
Part of it is dependent on the day, the situation, who the person is, how you're feeling in that moment. There is not any one formula that works. And I remember running into someone in the parking lot, and she was the preschool teacher and then director of the school that my kids went to. At this point, my younger daughter was 12. So it was a number of years earlier, and I was close to her. But when she said, "Hey, how are you doing?" I didn't feel like I could just shout across the parking lot, "Hey, diagnosed with breast cancer." It's so,
Right.
and then in the supermarket, I ran into a current mom of one of her soccer pals, and she said, "How are you doing?" And I was like frozen because I wasn't sure how much I wanted to say. And she said, well, it's not a hard question, but she was wrong. It was a hard question. And then I ran into her again at the checkout line and I explained to her what was happening. And she was like, oh, then she understood. And so it really depends on how much time you have, how much energy you have. It really is so many factors that go into it. And I learned to just honor wherever it was at that moment, to know that the next day in the same situation, I might make a different decision, and that's fine.
Right. Yeah. I think that that is something that we forget. I get the question all the time, how do I share about my fibromyalgia? I think a lot of times people are looking for that formula, like do this, do this, do this step by step or whatever. And it really does vary. I mean, how much you already know the person and like you said, how you feel in that given day. Like you're more apt to share what's going on with you on a day you feel good than on a day you feel bad, I think.
Yes, because you tend to have more energy on those days. It was amazing to me also during that time. It's like people must have a sensor how many people would make comments to me. Actually, for me, a lot about my hair because that changed. But strangers would, when I had my wig, the lady in the bank who would like, we'd never so much as like I didn't know that she knew me by name. She called to me across the lobby, oh, Mrs. Stafford, your hair looks so nice. It's like, it's,
That's so funny.
right. It's like now, and of course, my wig was very lovely, nicer than my own hair in many ways. And it just made me laugh. And then when I took the wig off and I had very short hair, someone in the grocery store said, "Oh, my hair was like that just a few weeks ago. I loved it when it was like that." And it's, am I wearing a sign that says, "Please talk to me about my hair"? But it was interesting, even that people would want to say something when they clearly didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so funny. That's so funny. I'm sure not all of the responses that you got were responses you wanted. Like maybe they were negative, or maybe it was just no response at all. How did you handle that?
It was definitely a learned thing with my emails that I sent out because the list grew over time. So there were more and more people. I could not have kept up with everyone responding, but I did begin to see patterns. There would be people who always responded. I knew them. There would be people who never responded. That was fine. There were people who I could tell had not read all of it because
Right.
they might say something that I had already addressed, and I had to be fine with that also, and just appreciate that people could only take in what they could take in. And I had to just be fine with what it was. And also, who they told. There wasn't a way for me to know, except sometimes running into someone, about who was sharing it and to whom. That was always a surprise. But I got a phone call from what turned out to be the mother of one of my older daughter's classmates from her Spanish class, which was very small, like 7 or 8 kids. And it turned out that his mom, who was younger than me, I was 49 when I was diagnosed, when she was definitely younger than me, had already been through the whole thing. And she was calling, offering to bring me food. And it took me totally off guard because right at that moment, I was like feeling pretty good. And it felt funny to take food from someone who I didn't know.
Yeah.
And we wound up chatting, and she didn't bring me a meal, but she did bring her hats and other things that were really useful because I lost all my hair and it was cold out because it started in the middle of summer, but I was a baldy through the winter. And it was really helpful to have little hats for when I wasn't wearing my wig, which was my go to. Some people just love to wear scarves or kerchiefs. And for me, my wig was like a hat. It was the easiest thing to just pop that thing on and be ready to go because it needed less care than my own hair. So it was easy.
I love that. I think that that is one of the biggest reasons that we don't share our stories is because we're afraid of how people might respond. Especially you and I were talking about this before I hit record, but especially with fibromyalgia because there's a lot of stigma there too. Did you end up with, because this happens to us all the time, but did you end up with all the people telling you all the things you should try that were going to help fix your your cancer?
Some did. Some
Yeah.
did. For some was around diet. Eat this, don't eat that. I did do some reading and did change my diet a little, really not till after, because during treatment, well, the thing that I stopped doing was eating meat, but during treatment, there were times when I craved protein. And so sometimes in the morning, I would have chicken for breakfast. I have tuna at 7 in the morning. My kids would look at me as nuts, but it was part of, I just wanted it. So I went for it. But people definitely have their opinions. Some people suggest particular kinds of treatments. There are people who suggest not doing anything Western and following a macrobiotic diet. And I understand a little better about that in terms of chemically what will not support the growth of the cells and what does. And so I have been more mindful about not eating red meat and trying to really limit my dairy. The tough one for me is sugar. If it could eliminate sugar, that would probably also be good, but I just try to not overdo it because you gotta
Right.
live life too.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And, one of the things that I loved at the beginning of your book was when you were talking about how many people came to you as you were sharing your story, saying how it helped them. If I could get y'all to get one point out of our talk today, it's this that when we share our stories, that helps everyone around us. And I would love, Meg, if you had, I don't know, a story or two of illustrations for how sharing your story helped somebody else.
On both sides of it, like one person directly said to me, I don't have breast cancer, but I now know that should I get it, I will be able to get through it. That really touched me. And that's why I wanted the book to be out there so that people could know that you can get through it. And also for the people around you, there were people who said, oh, now I know what my mother, sister, cousin, brother went through and didn't talk about or couldn't talk about. And I understand it so much better now. And again, I know there are people who are uncomfortable talking about it. So it's helpful for those around them to know what to do to be helpful. And again, that varies person to person. But one general thing I found was for people who would say to me, and I know that it was sincere, but they would say, let me know if I can do anything to help. And I know they meant it, but I was less likely to contact someone who said that than someone who said something like, tell me what day I can come and do your dishes, or tell me what day I can come. One person did come and shovel our driveway, which had become very icy, or what day is a good day for me to bring a meal to you. And so the specifics really made a difference in my being able to just respond rather than having to outreach to ask someone to do something.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That specificity really makes a big difference in how you're going to utilize that person's help.
Yeah, huge. Even though I know that they mean it, it's like, but like, would they want to take me to chemotherapy or like take me to an appointment? There are different levels of what people might feel comfortable doing.
Hmm. And that's actually another good sort of topic there is how do you choose like there's some people that are really close to you and you're maybe an open book and you share maybe the gory details, right? And then there are people who you share the details, but maybe not quite as deep, and kind of like there's layers. And then there's the people on the outside that you're just like, oh yeah, I was diagnosed with breast cancer and I'm going through treatment, and like, that's all.
Huh? Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you decide who was on that email list?
So the beginning ones are easy because they're the people that are closest and who want to know. And then over time, because my treatment extended really over a year and a half. So I remember going to a friend's house for a party, and there were people that we would see there that I wouldn't otherwise see, but I had known them for many years through those friends. And so it was definitely someone who I would be comfortable sharing what was happening. And so when someone like that would say, oh, can I be on your list? Then I would add them that way. So when people found out about it and asked, I always said yes. There wasn't anyone who I wouldn't want to know. I wasn't thinking about it being in book form at the time. It was actually people starting to suggest it to me that they felt like it helped them understand so much. I should consider getting it into book form. So after that, which was probably a year into, maybe not quite a year, but into the full year and a half, I started realizing that it could go out further. It could be helpful to other people. But still, that was part of the hitting send. I still wanted to be able to really be honest so that people would have a sense of what it's actually like on a day-to-day basis and how much it changes and how much life goes on also. Like there were just fun times with my family or silly things that happened. I was trying on some clothes in a store, and like my wig came off in the shirt. Like it's just and I
Right.
often had visions of like being in a car and someone like turning to me and waving, and I just wanted to like pop off my wig and wave back to them. But I could not quite bring myself to do that. But life goes on, and I realized that I was okay with people knowing whatever they were comfortable knowing.
Yes, and I think that that is such a key thing, is letting them decide where they fit into all those many layers. Not us deciding, but they decide, because you might have somebody that's super close to you that just for whatever reason can't handle that, right? And they need to be at a more a higher, less
Right,
information
outer
level.
ring.
Yeah. And then you might have people like the woman that you didn't even know who called you up and brought you hats, right? Like there may be people that opt into the inner circle just for whatever reason, because of their own experience or whatever.
Yes, right. That was a lot of learning. And for me, learning to accept and really appreciate whatever people were offering, that I couldn't do it all myself. I mean, I had my husband and my kids were 12 and 17. So the older one could drive, which was really helpful at the time, and could drive the younger. Was the only year that the two of them went to the same school was that year, the year of the bulk of treatment. But I had to learn that not only did I need help from other people, but they also needed support from other people. It's like, I'm the mom and I want to be there for them. But I was the source of the challenge sometimes. So I had to accept that they would get support from other people, from their friends, from each other, my husband from his brother, from some of his close friends. That was a big lesson for me.
Yes. Well, just that whole topic of accepting help is a biggie too.
Yes, right, in all its forms, and appreciating that people can offer it in many different ways. Friends of my younger daughters, the moms of them, two of her friends, organized a food chain for the 2 weeks following surgery. And just like whatever came in, great. It's whatever it was, I was really appreciative. whether it was something that I would make or not, or they were extending themselves, and was really helpful to have that assistance for some of the basics.
Definitely, definitely. I think sometimes letting people help us is a gift that we can give them. I remember many, many years ago when I was a kid, we had a house fire, and I overheard our priest at the time telling my mom that sometimes the biggest gift you can give someone is to let them give to you, because it's how they want to show their love, their support. And when we say, no, 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 that's, like refusing their love,
Right. Yes. It's not honoring who they are and where they are in that moment. When when I was pregnant with our older daughter, it was Christmas time and we were driving from New York State to Massachusetts, and we ran out of gas on Christmas Day. and,
Oh my goodness.
and we had our dog in the back, and we were not far from an exit, fortunately, but a couple pulled over not too long after, and they expressed exactly what you just said. It's like, oh, we're so glad that we can do something of service today of all days. And they really meant it. And it made it very easy for my husband to accept a ride to go get a can of gas to bring back. But I think about that a lot because also some people have a hard time accepting compliments. And it's a similar thing. Like if you don't accept it, you're shutting off what they're offering. And that can be really hurtful. So it's a good practice, even if it isn't easy, to learn how to accept things coming our way and appreciating where it's coming from.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Now, before we started recording, one of the things that you mentioned was that you wanted to be sure to share like the lessons that you got out of this and how everybody's lessons are different. And I think that that is so true of fibromyalgia as well. Like any health issue, it teaches you things about yourself, about the people around you, about life. It can be such a lesson. So I would love for you to share that.
I know that a lot of people feel that they learn to appreciate every day. And that's a good one because that's really important. And I feel like that maybe I gave me a heightened sense of that, but it was something that I was already aware of from some of the challenges younger in my life and some of the deaths that had happened in my family in opportune times. So I didn't take my days for granted already, but it was this issue of learning to accept help that I really had to become more graceful about. And it's an important one because it's not just then, but lots of other times in our lives, we need other people to do what we need to do. I mean, like, we're better together. Absolutely. Nobody has the corner on everything. So that was one that I still think about. I remember like dragging the laundry basket down the stairs with my good arm, and like it's someone else really could do that for me.
Right.
It's this push to want things to be normal, but to appreciate that when they aren't, they aren't. They may evolve to a different place, but to know that we need to take care of ourselves. And sometimes that means accepting the help and good wishes of others. It's one of the really silly things was with my wig. I was not supposed to expose it to a lot of steam because it was curly-ish like my own. And so if I expose it to a lot of steam, it could just uncurl and not easy to curl again. So like taking a pot of spaghetti off the stove, somebody else had to do that. Just like
Right. Yes.
everyday cooking things. Or I had to like take it off and put it somewhere else on top of a lamp or anywhere. Somewhere that hopefully the cat would not curl up in it. I always had an image of our 22-pound cat curled up in my wig, but he didn't ever actually do it. But he used to like to lie on people's shoes because I now learn that people's feet have a strong scent of that person. And I thought that my wig might, he might like it also, but he didn't do
I
that.
definitely laughed when I read that part of your book because having had many cats in my life, yes, I could absolutely see that being an issue.
Yeah. You get to see
Uh,
what he would look like with dark hair.
right, right, exactly. Oh my goodness. Too funny, too funny. The other thing that I really loved that you said at the beginning of your book, and this was true for my fibromyalgia journey as well, but you said at the beginning that you never had any question about if you could get through it. It was more a matter of how you were going to get through it. And I think that self-efficacy, right? That resilience that we have, that knowledge in ourselves that, okay, this is a challenge that's coming up, but it's just a matter of figuring it out. It's not a matter of, am I going to survive or not? And I think that that's an important piece too.
And I was fortunate because I knew from the beginning that my prognosis was really good. So I could just keep my eyes on the prize there and keep moving through it. Whereas I know not everybody is afforded that kind of what felt like a certainty. And although I was diagnosed with stage two, it sort of just crept into stage two, which meant that I had to get like all this treatment. We're always on a continuum of where medicine is in terms of our treatment and how sophisticated it is. But a friend who had also gone through it, and she had started in stage four. I found out recently that she was just 40 when she was diagnosed with stage four. And she regarded all the chemo and all the radiation as insurance. It sure ain't pleasant, but if this is going to help prevent it, then it's worth it. And I was, again, fortunate because I was on the younger side and I was very active. So I think that being in otherwise good health is helpful. And it was helpful for me. And again, it was a time to access some of those ancillary kinds of treatments like acupuncture, which I had never done before, but I was really open to trying. And you only know what you did do, but I do feel like it was helpful in keeping my symptoms to a minimum so that I could bike 15 or 20 miles during chemotherapy after the first week, or I was still walking the dogs or doing whatever. But whatever it is that helps you to move through it rather than getting stuck in any one place, I think is helpful. The massage, when I could, like also helpful in keeping me relaxed and keeping things moving in my body.
Right, right. Sometimes it's those little things like a massage to keep things moving and keep you relaxed. It's not chemotherapy, but it's part of the puzzle, right? It's part of the whole picture that makes everything else work well.
Right. Yeah. It's I said one friend offered to come and rub my feet. It's like, oh my goodness, you're saint. It's not something that would have even occurred to me to ask, but it was something that she just enjoyed and she thought would be something I would appreciate, which I certainly did. So
That's awesome.
any of the things that are fun to make sure that you're doing those if you're up to them. Friends who had had a boat and like was a little tricky because it's maybe not the thing to do if you're feeling squeamish or like nauseous,
Nauseous. Right, right.
but going to a movie or visiting friends or going to a park, whatever it is that feels good, do it because that's so important.
Yes, it's such an important part of our healing. I see that sometimes with my students and clients, right? Like this idea that I'm sick, so that means I can't have fun. And I don't know where we get this idea. but it's under there, like one of my students once told me that when she was pretty ill and she was pretty much in bed, she didn't even let herself watch fun things on TV because she was sick and she wasn't supposed to be having fun. She was sick.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's a great time to have people send you their silly cat videos and
Yes.
all the things that make you laugh. I would tell people, send me jokes, send me what TV show you're watching that you really enjoy, something to balance out the other stuff. Not every day, like anything else. Sometimes you're in the mood and sometimes not, but definitely to include it. It happened just the other day when actually I realized a surgeon that I had met the first time around, and this time he was talking about the microsurgery and that there are microsurgeons that perform it, and all I could imagine was that they're this big, they're
These
just teeny
micro
tiny
surgeons.
little, right? They're just little teeny people with little tiny implements. It's but it happened a couple of times.
I remember you said something similar about the plastic surgeon.
Right. Right. Well, we were looking at this the other day, like, where's the plastic? But it's more related to change and shaping something. And the lasers, some of the science in places would make me chuckle. Or hearing a lullaby, I had figured I was in the radiation area and like there's playing a lullaby down here, but it actually meant that a baby was being born, obviously elsewhere in the hospital. But like, why are they playing a lullaby in the middle of it here? And that was it. But
I love all the little ways of like acknowledging life, that we're still here, that we're still going, that like that joy of just being alive is still there.
absolutely, maybe that's one of the things that is more appreciated because it's not. It's hard not to think about our mortality when we're sick. And I usually am very impatient being sick because I'm not great at sitting down, but it's good to know that it is temporary and it does pass through. So the more we let in, the easier it is to get out. And that's what the stories help me with, to not get stuck in any one place. Even the scary parts don't have to stay in, and in fact move through quicker if we're able to get them out. Looking at the surgery, looking at things that were really difficult, was helpful to have somebody there for me, but also helpful to write about because it wasn't easy, but it was done. Some of those scary things, they're scary the first time, they're less scary each time after.
Hmm. And it gives you a way to process all of that too. I'm sure your thoughts, your emotions leading up to the surgery and everything else, like processing that through your writing. And I think too, like when we hold those things in, they get bigger and scarier, I think, like getting it
Absolutely.
outside you, on a piece of paper or even just talking to someone. You get it in the light and it doesn't look quite so frightening.
It takes the air out of that balloon to speak it or to write it. So in my therapy practice, I will sometimes assign people to either write to someone or to write about something. And there is a process that happens in the writing of it, in the telling of it, that changes it. It transmutes it. It can't maintain its shape and its power once it's out. As you say, as the light hits it, it can't continue to expand. So really helpful and powerful. And any of my clients who took me up on it would always say how much differently they felt afterwards. And for me, I like the physical act of writing. I mean, when I was writing the emails, that was on the computer. I didn't want to have to transpose it. but often the physical act of writing helps me to get it out in a different way. And so it is whatever is most accessible to people. Again, one of those personal choices.
Right, absolutely. And, it can even be talking out loud to yourself, like just getting it out. There was one class that I took. It was about pain and how to manage pain. One of the assignments was to write about your pain and just using your finger, not even any ink, and just like write on your leg, on the table, like whatever you want to write on, but writing it. So it's not even about necessarily having the story out there. It's just about getting it outside yourself.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's like think about that, writing it in the air.
Something you can do if you're lying in bed at night and you're frustrated with your pain or whatever, write with your little finger.
About it or to it? Do you address it?
This class was really just kind of like a brain dump, how you're feeling about your pain, literally how you feel, like physically how you feel, like just whatever comes to mind. So it could be to it, or it could just be about it, just however it came to you. But yeah, it was really interesting. So, for the people who are listening who are thinking, okay, I could see where maybe sharing my story might help me and somebody else, how would you have somebody start?
I think probably easiest to start with a journal. At least it is a way to get it out. And sometimes with letters to someone else. And sometimes I will suggest that someone just let it out, write, and don't think about it, just get it out there. Don't self edit.
Like a stream of consciousness, kind of?
Yep, just whatever comes up, let it go. Don't worry about the grammar, don't worry about spelling. And then if there's someone that you want to share it with, you can review it and take the pieces that feel most relevant. By getting it out first, there's material to choose from, and you can pick whatever feels most relevant. And then choose someone that you trust. In fact, in my writing process, it was suggested that I create an avatar of my ideal audience and someone who really understands you and gets you. And that was helpful to imagine that it's someone who I know laughs at my jokes or someone who was attentive and willing to listen. And that's helpful because not everybody will be like that, but they don't have to be. Different people will get different pieces, but the more honest we're able to be, the more people are able to connect with us and see themselves, even if it's not exactly their experience. People can tell when we're honest. So it behooves us all to let it be there. It's interesting because as a therapist, the self disclosure is an issue. And I actually, with a friend and colleague who we actually went to graduate school together, we did a class on self disclosure for therapists. And in that class, there was one woman who had been in treatment herself, but did not tell any of her clients. And I couldn't have done it that way because I thought it would be, well, I can't remember now actually if she had chemotherapy. If she did, then it's going to be obvious that there's a change. But if you don't, which many women don't have to, especially now, if it's caught early enough. But still, I knew that they were going to notice. So I wanted to tell them.
Yeah, whether you're canceling an appointment because of many, many doctor visits, or just now you're wearing a wig, or just we don't always look so well when we're green with nausea or whatever. But
And my promise to myself and to them was that I would only be in the office if I felt well enough to be there. There was one person who was really worried about me, and that was hard for her. But most people, I just was able to continue to carry on. And one person I realized had stayed in treatment I felt that he was done, and I was trying to nudge him, like he'd gotten to a good place. And he stayed for several more months, and then he finally admitted that it was his way of taking care of me, that he wanted to make sure that I had clients. And like, you don't have to worry about that. But then I understood a little better where he was coming from. Even though I tried to let people know, I couldn't help how they would feel. I tried to let them know that I would only be there if I was really feeling that I could be present and ready to work, which I was most of the time. So people have their own reactions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's something that we can kind of work on too. So, do you have any tips on that part of things? Like, okay, I'm going to maybe go out and start sharing a little bit of my story. How can we sort of prepare ourselves or shift our thinking to where we can let their reaction be their reaction and have it not be about me?
So important. If we can get to a place where we don't have expectations about what that reaction is going to be, and if we can be curious, we can engage our curiosity, then we have a little space to observe what's happening and what they're saying. And then it's more about what we're learning. We're not being judged, we're not being graded in any way. But if we can be curious and just see, well, how is it going to be different across these three or four people? Be interesting to know. And afterwards, does it track with what we know of that person? Is it different from what we might have thought? Because it can be surprising, because you're right, sometimes the people closest to us are not ready to hear everything, but someone who we don't know as well may be very able to hear it and may be curious about it themselves. If we can know it's in some ways about them even more than it is about us, it makes it easier to say and know that there doesn't have to be repercussion or nothing's going to happen. It's
Right, right. That's really true of all of life, right? We need to let their stuff be their stuff and not mine. Yep, yep. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story, and for sharing your story in your book too. So, for you listening, if you are interested, Meg's book, Topic of Cancer, Riding the Waves of the Big C, it's a great read. Yes, there's some heavy stuff in there, but there is also so much fun in there. And so it's kind of like a draw back the curtain and, see somebody's diary as they're going through this, but with also a sense of fun and lightness. If you've got anybody in your life that's going through something like this, it'll definitely give you a good insight into what they're going through. So thanks for doing that.
thank you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here, and my hope that it will make it easier for other people. I do say that if you don't laugh out loud at least once, I give you your money back. So
Yes, and you will, I promise. Many times.
here we go. Thank you for having me. It's been really fun to talk to you and to get to know you a little bit more too.
Yes, absolutely. And for you listening, stay tuned. We've got our listener shout out, and I'll make sure that I haven't said this yet in today's episode, but we'll also have links to Meg's books and where you can connect with her in today's show notes. It's fibromyalgiapodcast.com, and this is episode 146. So fibromyalgiapodcast.com/146, and you'll find all those links there.
Awesome. Thank you.
And that wraps up my interview with Meg Stafford, psychotherapist, author, and storyteller. If you'd like to check out Meg's book, Topic of Cancer, Riding the Waves of the Big C, be sure to check out today's show notes for a link to where you can find it on Amazon. Her second memoir is also available, Who Will Accompany You? My Mother-Daughter Journeys Far From Home and Close to the Heart. And if you'd like to hear some fibromyalgia stories of hope, I invite you to sign up for our free Stories of Hope series. This private series features interviews with our students, graduates, and clients. They share their stories as well as the ways that they found to improve their fibromyalgia symptoms. You can sign up totally for free using the link in today's show notes. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/146. And now I've got this week's listener shout out for you. This comes from an email I received recently from Michelle. Her note here is such a good example of why it's important to share our stories. She says, I started reading your first book and I'm finding so much wonderful information. To be honest, for so many years, I have just lived with fibromyalgia, going through ups and downs, hiding the pain, fatigue, brain fog, because people just don't understand. But your podcasts and book, and now this new tool, the Fibromyalgia Wellness Style Quiz, is giving me the freedom to be heard. I am not, quote, just depressed. I have real pain, real fatigue. Brain fog is real. This has slowed me down. I am so thankful to you, Tami, for letting our voices be heard. I love this new tool and am very excited to use it and all the other resources you provide. Thank you so much for that, Michelle. And for those of you listening, if you're interested in checking out this new tool that she is so excited about, it's the Fibromyalgia Wellness Style Quiz. You can find a link in today's show notes at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/146, or you can just go straight to fibroquiz.com. This quiz is exclusive. I created it, so this is the only place you're going to find it. It is based on science, and it identifies your unique fibromyalgia wellness style using the 5-factor model of personality. Take the quiz and find out, are you the ponderer, the prevailer, the playmaker, or the perfectionist? Once you find out, that will also unlock for you your natural strengths to help you reduce pain, boost energy, clear the brain fog, and improve your sleep. And if you sign up for the advanced profile, which is also free, you'll receive a series of emails that will give you insights and personalized guidance tailored to your unique wellness style. It will give you things like insights into what causes your flares, how to prevent them, and ways to recover easier. Again, you can find that free quiz linked in today's show notes at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/146 or at fibroquiz.com. That wraps up our episode for today. I will see you all back here next time. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse. For daily doses of hope, inspiration, and practical advice, come hang out with me on Facebook. Visit facebook.com/fibrocoach to find my personal coaching page and connect with me directly. To find the show notes, additional resources, or to schedule a consultation with me or one of my coaches, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com.